Welcome to Testing in the Pub.
Hi, welcome back to Testing in the Pub. Today we're going to be talking about doing the right thing versus doing things right. So, hi Dan.
How's it going?
Very well, thank you.
So, right thing versus thing right. There's something that I think in the agile community, not just the agile testing community, but agile as a whole, I hear a lot of people talking about this right thing versus thing right, and it's a good topic I think to cover today. What do we think it means first? So, how would we define right thing? What does that mean?
The right thing. So, have you built something which there was actually a need to build? So, is there a say take an example. You build something to ultimately validate a business hypothesis, for want of a better way of putting it. I.e., you might make a change to, I don't know, an e-commerce site in order to drive more traffic, for example, or something as simple as make more revenue. Have you done that? So have you actually built something that was required, or that adds value?
Well, I think that's interesting because you're kind of using past tense there. Have you built something? But I would put right thing at the ideas sort of phase, where
Okay.
you're asking questions and you're defining what is right.
Oh, so the sorts
You're
of questions
defining
you
the
might
thing that is
ask
right.
when you were having, when you were planning, sizing.
The amigo conversations.
Yep.
So you're asking the what and the why initially to sort of like define to discover what it is that you're actually being asked to do up front.
Yep.
Why you ask that, so that you're discovering what the actual problem is,
Yep.
to see if this is the right solution to that problem.
Yep.
What are the other solutions?
Yep. And would
And
you consider that a testing activity?
definitely, yeah. Some people might call it requirements analysis, but it's just questioning, right? It's
Yeah.
questioning an idea or requirement. So definitely, but talking about it being a testing activity, it's one that everyone's responsible for.
It's a. Would you say it was a quality activity?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Would you?
Yes, I absolutely would. I'm playing devil's advocate here
Well,
slightly.
actually, I think that it's not. It's something that would feed into quality.
An enabler for quality, or a potential enabler.
It's kind of like defining what quality means with regards to the thing, which is like a feature or. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, the reason I was playing devil's advocate there massively, and one reason was because there's so many discussions I've had around where do testers get involved.
Yep.
And what I always say is they get involved as early as you can get involved. So from my perspective, running a team, I want the testers involved, reviewing requirements, reviewing designs, reviewing wireframes, being kind of bringing in that much broader kind of voice of the customer sort of view as early as possible, and that does help then for us to try and build the right thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, is there companies that don't involve testers that early anymore?
Yeah, there is.
Is it kind of like waterfall companies though? Is that
Yeah,
agile
no.
companies?
Even well, it depends whether you agile companies doing agile or agile companies that think they're doing agile.
Yeah.
I still speak to lots of people who say, "Oh yeah, we had to really fight to get into this meeting or that meeting." It was quite interesting. Test bash last month. The presentation. What was the name of the presentation? That's gonna. I can't remember the name of the presentation by Martin Heine. So sorry, Martin, if I can't remember the name of your presentation. My excuse is you were on right before me, and I was a little distracted. But his presentation was great, and it was about how he changed the job titles of testers and almost experimented with the job titles of testers to see how then the role was perceived by other people, and simply changing the job titles and inserting the words like business and stuff in there meant that suddenly the testers were getting invited to all manner of meetings much earlier in the process that they weren't being invited to before. So I think a lot of it still goes on. I think
So is that bred by, I want to say, misconceptions that people have of the title tester?
Yeah, I believe it is. I think it massively is. I mean, I still see that.
So it would be interesting. I'm assuming I didn't see Martin's talk, but I heard really good things about it. But I'm assuming that he then reverted back to the old title.
Essentially, yes.
So did the problems come back, or did
I think
did
they
you
to a,
cure the
to a
misconception?
certain extent, but not to the extent that they were previously.
Right. Okay. So
I-
that's really interesting.
It is. His his presentation, or all the test batch presentations were videoed, and I
I
think
need to look at it.
they've just released Michael Bolton's keynote, so I'm assuming they'll work their way through, probably in chronological order. So wait a few weeks, and then his talk will be available. Yeah, definitely recommend watching. Really interesting topic.
So job titles might enable people being involved in the right thing then, right?
Well, it may not necessarily being involved, but it will make it easier to be involved.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of testers and a lot of companies who have to kind of fight to get into those sorts of meetings. That's quite sad, and it's certainly not efficient, and it is reflective of that more old school way of thinking, i.e., yeah, testing is verifying stuff at the end. So it's all about is this thing right? Not is it the right thing?
So right, okay. So this is a distinction. This is how I would draw it in my head. Ultimately, on the left-hand side, I've got right thing, right, which is where I would have like planning and sizing and those three egos conversations, and off
Yep.
that's when you stem the questions. Initially, it's the what and the why, and we spoke about them.
Yep.
Then we'd have who, where, and when.
Yep.
Project and product
Yep.
levels. So project level who might be the team. Who else do we need to speak to, like build team or DevOps,
Yep.
or it could be a dev tools.
Yep.
Who's going to be available within the team? Who has the skills? Who needs more to upskill to be able to do this work?
Yep.
But at project level, you're thinking who might be like user roles, or it might be interactions, or it could be accessibility, things like that.
Yep.
So these questions feed into the overall picture of the thing, right?
Yep.
The feature. And then obviously once you've asked those questions, then you can ask the how.
Yep.
Right? How are we actually going to build this?
Yep.
Do we need to think about security, performance? How do we bake
Yep.
testability into this?
Yep.
Right? So that would be the left-hand side, and I think that stems things like feature files, scenarios, those requirement examples,
Yep.
test sessions.
Well,
doing
even
session-based
kind of
test
winding
management.
it back a little bit, it just kind of it sets those ideas,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Before even getting specific, it kind of gives that time, and it enables ultimately the team delivery to be more predictable and smoother, and not that classic model of, oh yeah, the devs have decided to do this. Ah, right, we all now need to quickly rush and play catch up. Oh god,
Yeah.
testing is so slow.
But then, on the flip side, there's a risk, right? That we spend too much time asking these questions and going round in circles, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to, I guess, have some sort of mechanism for recording these conversations so that you're not repeating constantly, right? Have a knowledge base of something as you
Yeah.
build up that information.
Yeah. Yeah. Some sort of, well, essentially some sort of discipline-based note taking and general meeting etiquette. As an aside, it would be great to have some sort of massively searchable way of just recording meetings, wouldn't it? Imagine if you had some system where basically all you had to do was just plonk your phone down in the middle of the meeting, start recording it, and then upload it somewhere, and it would go away, catalogue all of what you discussed, and then make that searchable on the web, and then you'd never have to take any notes again. That would be awesome.
Like you're talking like voice to text.
Yeah, that'd be quite cool, wouldn't it?
That's an app.
Yeah. Right. Okay. We'll edit this bit
Patented
out.
here.
We'll edit this bit out, and then go away and build it, and then put this in a future podcast. Okay. So have we built the right thing, or are we going to build the right thing? So I think an also really important thing at that point is what comes out of those sorts of conversations and the decisions that come out of those sorts of conversations. So it may well be that one or more ways of doing things are rejected at that stage, or tweaked or changed in some particular way. I'm thinking from an application perspective, for example. You may quite frequently, when we're having those sorts of discussions, we're adapting the user flow and the UI as we go, because
it's refactoring your ideas.
Yeah,
on the
I like
feature.
that. I like you. I was about to interrupt you there and say it's not refactoring because refactoring would imply we've done something, but ideas refactoring. Yeah, I like that.
It's true though, and that also kind of stems our other testing activities. Like I mentioned, the feature files. Well, they're not testing activities, but there's certainly more than likely going to be UI automation pending. You're going to have unit tests.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have session charters.
Yep.
And other exploratory testing. But yeah, you hinted on wireframes and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah,
that would stem out of those conversations. But yeah, of course, there's going to be a refactoring element to this as well. So as you learn more information, you'll update your session charters and your wireframes.
It's far better to find out that you can't design, say, a UI or a user flow for an application or a website in a particular way because there's a technological constraint at the beginning than it is at the point when you're trying to build it.
Yep, exactly. And all of this information then feeds into the right. Right?
Yep.
Because that's what we use to check and test.
Yeah, and ultimately, what you don't want to be doing when you're checking and testing and you're trying to figure out is this thing right, to find that you've wasted a whole bunch of time because you're essentially checking against something which turns out to be incorrect. So, as an example, I mean, I've seen these situations frequently where a requirement or a user flow may say do it this way. The dev will have done it a different way because there's a constraint. There'll be a reason why it's impossible to maybe code a UI in a particular way. And then when the tester comes along and says, "Oh, sorry, that's not quite right," or if it's a kind of more old school way of doing things, raises a whole bunch of bugs saying it's not right, to be then confronted with, "Oh yeah, we can't do it that way, so I did it this way instead."
But that also feeds into the questions that you ask as well, right? Because when you started describing that, I thought that it was a different perspective, right? At the end,
Mm-hmm.
like we've asked that who question, and we've spoke to the stakeholders, being the customers that are paying for it. And when we've delivered it to the users, they then come back and feedback saying, "Oh, that's not right." Now, it's kind of, we should ask the question about the users up front as well, like the who question, and get them involved in these conversations, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you should. It's more difficult. You should do it.
Yeah, obviously context dependent.
It is, yeah, it's highly contextual, and also it's dependent on the users. It's a lot simpler to and the whole idea of MVP comes about because a user will tell you whether it's what they wanted, or their feedback is it's much simpler for them to give that feedback, and it's much easier for them to get that feedback if you show them something. You show them something tangible, and you say, we've built this, and they go, "Oh no, not quite right," and you go, "It's okay, it's only an MVP, it's a tiny little thing, right, okay, we'll change it, we'll do something else." That's one of the whole cornerstones of Agile in the first place, which is incremental iterative development.
I have to say though, I've moved away from the term MVP. I'm now using Smurfs. Have you heard about Smurfs?
I have not.
So Matt Barcombe has coined the term Smurfs, and it means
Smurfs as in little blue guys with white hats.
Well, yeah, but it's an acronym, so it means specifically marketable, usable release feature set.
Nice.
So it means the same thing as a minimum viable product, but minimum viable product stems a lot of misconceptions. What does minimal mean, and what is viable? Right? So it's kind of, and there's no hint of quality. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, I broke it down into the smallest chunk, right?
Yeah.
Which released on its own really is not usable, right?
But therefore, surely it's not viable.
Well, possibly. Yeah, you could argue that, but there's going to be that big sort of conversation because people aren't sure because of that term. Whereas with Smurfs, you've got words like marketable. Right now, when you're thinking about breaking stories, then now using MVP terminology, do you think about that word marketable? Do you think about involving salespeople and saying, well, actually, if we release this, how would you actually market this? Do you know what I mean? You think about usable, right? You think about releasable.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about this smallest feature chunk that is valuable ultimately,
Yeah.
right? So rather than just that minimum viable product. Even I used to say change the V from viable to valuable, and then kind of to try and promote that. But I love the extra words of marketable and usable. You know.
Yeah, no, it's good, and you also get
promote the Smurfs.
promote the Smurfs. You also get to draw little blue white hatted men everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
If that's your sort of thing.
Yeah.
So talking about things right, what do you think is important to consider when we're thinking about, is this thing right?
Well, it's kind of based off the conversations that you have with right thing, right? So it's kind of those ideas that you have, the things that you're clarifying for making sure that thing is right to begin with. You know what I mean? Hence, right thing, right? You're using that information to stem all your test ideas and check ideas, right? So the checks in the unit tests and the feature files, and you might still have some sort of checks that you do as part of your exploratory testing, right? And I guess you're asking those questions of the software, of the operation and observation, which is checking and testing that the thing is right. But I think a really good question is what we mean by thing as well, because we could apply this to many things, not just the feature.
What else could we apply it to?
Well, processes, right? The right thing to do in terms of processes.
Yeah.
But then what does thing right mean there?
Well, maybe thing right is the backward-looking step, essentially. So right thing is the forward-looking step, and more of the activities are done up front before you do something. So in a process case, you would define the process. So thing right would be, how are we going to define this process? How's it going to work? Let's iterate through some ideas, and then right thing. And then thing right would be, well, okay, we've tried this, we've experimented. Has it worked? How are we going to essentially how are we going to validate whether this process change is worthwhile continuing with?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's kind of future tense and past tense, isn't it? Really, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
So right thing is, how do we do the right thing future wise, and thing right is kind of, did we do the thing right?
Yeah. Glad I got that right. This is sounding more like a test.
It's getting quite confusing.
Maybe that's the next one. Maybe that future podcast. Dan interviews Steve for a fictional position.
Yeah, I'm up for that. There's a bit more beer.
Yeah, you can pay me afterwards. It's fine if you're going to interview me. So you've one thing to kind of pick up on. We were talking about thing right. You said checking a lot. I picked up on the fact you said checking far more than. Do you think
Checking
that?
and
Do you think
testing.
do you think there's more checking in that activity than there is what we might call testing? Checking obviously being a part of testing.
Looking at the testing activities, right, and checking activities. Well, we've got the sort of questioning from the right thing. I would even class that as exploratory testing, right? Because you're exploring the idea of the thing, right?
I suppose, yeah.
You're asking probing questions. It's investigation, right?
Yeah. Let's not forget that testing is not an activity that you do 100% of the time after you have some software to test. That's the key thing, isn't it? It's an activity across the entire process.
The entire process, yeah. So that's definitely a testing activity, but I would call it exploration as well, right? So it's investigation. So that's the difference to me. Is like, checking is where you have an explicit expectation that you're checking against.
Yeah.
Right? Checking an actual with an expected outcome, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the check that you're doing. You're performing some steps, whether they are explicit steps or not. You're still checking an explicit expectation against an actual expectation.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas testing is where it's investigation. You have no explicit expectation. You're exploring and investigating and experimenting. I like that word, experimenting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of you're kind of
You have a hypothesis.
Playing with it.
You have a
Yeah,
hypothesis essentially.
Yeah,
You're validating
essentially.
whether in controlled conditions your
That
hypothesis turns out to be true or not.
Yeah.
That's
It could be
the core of scientific experimentation.
I guess it might not necessarily be a hypothesis, though. It could be just a question: what happens if I do this?
That's a hypothesis, isn't it?
Well, no. Well, hypotheses have some form of expectation, right? So with a hypothesis, certainly when I'm
okay, I
thinking
get your
about
point. I get your point.
medically, right,
Yeah, I get your point.
clinical trials and metadata,
Yeah.
then I'm thinking about their clinical trials stem from a hypothesis
Yeah.
where they think we believe that this drug will cure this
Yeah.
disease.
Yeah.
Right?
So I completely understand what you mean.
So that although it's not just a check, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not just checking the drug cures the disease, you're investigating that drug,
Yeah.
right, to see what actually happens
Yeah.
as well, right?
So it's all about the boundaries
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. Yeah. So when it comes to other testing activities, when we've got things like unit tests, they're actually checking activities, because a unit test you write your explicit expectation and then it's asserting whether that's true or false, right?
Yep.
Pass or fail, right? So that's the same with UI automation as well, right? So if you automate your requirement examples behind your feature files,
Yep.
your step defs. So yeah, they're ultimately still checks as well with automation.
Absolutely.
It's checks.
You're making an algorithmic decision.
Exactly. Now you've also got your exploratory testing at that side. You've got code reviews at that side
Yep.
that aren't checks. That's testing activities, right?
Mm.
And I think even although we've got these individual testing activities, I would say that everyone's responsible during each activity as well. So testers are also responsible for unit testing in a way where they pair with developers.
Mhm.
Right? I love pairing with a developer when they're unit testing, because I'll have different experiences. Yes, I'll get to learn a little bit about coding, learn their checks, but also I'll be able to pitch in with ideas on what to check.
Yep.
Right? They'll talk about the feature, and I'll learn about the feature, and I'll be able to imagine that, and essentially build models and generate ideas of how it might fail, and then we'll have a conversation. Right? So I think it's important for testers to get involved in things like that. Equally, it's important for developers to get involved in the exploratory testing side.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Swarm, right? I've been doing mob testing for a while. I also do pairing with testing sessions. Right? So, and it's with developers as well. They're involved because they bring different things to the table as well, different perspectives.
Yeah, it's something I've used a lot as well. Yeah, we bring the whole team together when you've got essentially a testable feature, and you've been through that unit test step. You've been probably through that functional test step again.
Bug bashes.
Bug bashes, exactly.
Bug bashes.
Exactly. That's what we do. It works. It works pretty effectively. I wouldn't say it would work effectively as the only method of testing, but it works very effectively to supplement other methods. What's quite interesting, kind of just popped into my head as well here, is that if we talk about is it the right thing versus is the thing right, we haven't actually used the word testing at all. And maybe this can be a good vehicle for in a company or a team which for some reason there's a certain stigma attached to the word testing or tester. This could be a good way of describing a good process and putting some kind of boundaries around a good process without actually using necessarily the word testing, which could help to sell things. And
What word could you use in its place, though? Questioning.
well, no. I think if we're just talking about this whole idea of is it the right thing, is the thing right, it can be a starting point for a discussion, which then ultimately leads on to testing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't start with, "Hi, person who might not be interested. I want to talk to you about testing." And then they instantly, if they're that sort of person, they might instantly kind of be turned off and on the back foot. This can be a good kind of way of leading into a conversation that naturally comes towards testing, is not solely about testing, but enables us to kind of have that starting point of the conversation. I think it could
It's
help.
interesting. And do you know what else we've not actually spoke about? It's kind of like sprint flow. We've mentioned about planning and sizing, but where does a sprint actually start? Does it start with the right thing or thing right? Because the right thing is kind of more planning and sizing and have the conversations, right?
What would traditionally be pre-sprint activities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe the outcome of those conversations should also be kind of a definition of ready to be able to pull into the sprint.
Yeah, or an entry criteria if you're running Kanban, entry criteria to whatever is the leftmost column on your board.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then if you think about it, coding and checking and testing from that and that happens in the sprint is based off of those conversations that happen before anyway, right?
Yep.
Developers start looking at unit tests where all the tests are appearing. You should have your feature files by then. So you start thinking about the step tests behind them and automation behind them. You also should have some sort of session charters. So you start building up on that based on what you know. And you ultimately begin your coding of the software as well, right? So
yeah, it starts it all nice and early, doesn't it? Ultimately.
Yep. Interesting.
So, interesting conversation there, Dan. Is it the right thing? Is the thing right? Where does testing fit? We'd be really interested to know everyone else's thoughts on this. So leave a comment against the blog post or catch us on Twitter @testinginthepub, and we'll be back very, very soon.